Welcome to the Daily Shift. Every day, a shift is happening in the heavens, in the nations, in our own lives. Our work here is simple: to hear what the Spirit is saying and take the shift with it. Today, we start a series of podcasts, or should I say episodes on marriage. But before we dive into it, let me ask you something before we start. Where do you think marriage came from? Was it invented by government so property could be inherited cleanly? Was it invented by religion to control people's sexual behavior? Was it invented by culture, that in every nation, every tribe on earth just happened to land on the same idea independently? Or was it none of those things? Was it given? Today we are going back to the first pages of Scripture. Before there was a nation of Israel, before there was a law, before there was even sin in the world, to find out who actually started this thing called marriage and what it was built to be. I promise you, once you see the original design, you'll never look at marriage the same way again. Let's start with a definition. Not a cultural one, not a legal one, but a scriptural one. Let's turn to the Bible book of Genesis chapter 2 verse 24. And this is what it says. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. One verse, but there's more theology packed into that one verse than most people build their entire marriage on. Look at the four things happening in this verse. First, it says leave. A man leaves his father and mother. This is not just moving out of the house. This is a public, decisive break from being primarily dependent on your family of origin. Many marriages in our communities today struggle precisely because this leaving never actually happened. The couple is legally married, but emotionally, financially, spiritually, one or both of them never left home. Secondly, hold fast. Some translation says cleave. This is covenant language. It is the same intensity of word Scripture uses to describe Israel's loyalty to God Himself. You'll find it in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 10. This is not I feel close to you. This is I have bound myself to you. Thirdly, the verse talks about one flesh. And here's where people get it wrong. We think this is only about sex. It's not. It's about identity. Genesis is telling us that two separate people become one new unit, one new legal spiritual reality where two used to stand, not close, not aligned, but one. And lastly, this is the piece that will change how you think or you talk about marriage wherever you go. This is a creation ordinance. It happens before Moses, before the 10 Commandments, before Israel exists as a nation, before sin has entered the picture at all. That means marriage is not a religious ritual that God got invented later and then God decided to bless. Marriage is not something the church created. Marriage is built into the structure of the world itself, the same way gravity is, the same way day and night are. So here's the definition I want us to walk away with. Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. A contract is transactional. I give you this, you give me that. And the moment either side stops delivering, the deal is void. That is how most of us, including a lot of born-again Christians, are quietly running our marriages today. And it's exactly why so many marriages are collapsing. You cannot run a covenant institution on contract terms. A covenant is different. A covenant is a binding of persons sustained by promise, not by performance. It does not ask, what have you done for me lately? It says, I bound myself to you and I intend to keep that. That is what marriage is. This is what marriage is. Now here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. God did, personally, directly, with his own hands, as mentioned in the text. Because we are asking, who instituted marriage? God did. He did it personally, he did it directly with his own hands. As the text in Genesis chapter 2, starting verse 18, is going to reveal to us. Watch what God does step by step. In verse 18, God diagnoses a problem. He looks at Adam in a perfect and fallen world and says, it is not good that the man should be alone. Let that sink in. Before sin ever entered creation, God had already identified something as not good. And it was man's aloneness, not sin, but aloneness of man. In verse 21 to 22, God designs the solution himself. He doesn't tell Adam to go and find a companion. He puts Adam into a deep sleep, takes a rib from his side and forms Eve. Notice, not from the dust like Adam, but from Adam's own side, shared substance, a separate creation standing apart from him, but flesh of his flesh. The second part of verse 22 says that God performs the very first wedding. The text says God himself brought her to the man. God was the officer, the marriage officer. There was no priest, no pastor, no government official. God walked Eve down the aisle, if you want to picture it that way. And in verse 24, God speaks the very first teaching on marriage, the one we just unpacked. And this is the verse Jesus himself later quotes as final authority when he's questioned about marriage. You'll find that in Matthew chapter 19. Jesus does not go to Moses to settle the question. He goes back to Genesis. He goes back to the origin. So here is what we need to understand. And I want to say it plainly. Marriage is not a human invention that God later blessed. It is God's invention that human beings have distorted ever since. Every government on earth that registered marriages, every culture that has wedding ceremonies, every religion that has a marriage rite, all of them are borrowing something that already belonged to God first, whether they know it or not. Man did not invent marriage. We inherited it. And in most cases, we have been reshaping it to fit our own convenience ever since. Before I leave, let me leave you. Before I close, let me leave you with this. If marriage was God's idea, given before sin, given as his personal design, then your marriage, my marriage, and every person's marriage is not something you get to define on your own terms. It is not a private arrangement between two consenting adults to be renegotiated whenever it becomes inconvenient. It is something you have stepped into that already had a designer, a purpose, a shape long before you arrived. In our next episode, we are going to go deeper into exactly why God gave us this, the divine purpose behind marriage. And I promise you, it goes further beyond companionship or romance. There are at least 5 reasons God built this institution, and most believers only know one of them. So until then, I ask you to go back and read Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 to 24 for yourself this week. Sit with it. Meditate upon it. Pray over it. Let it settle. And then ask yourself honestly, is my marriage being run as a covenant or as a contract? May God's mercies be upon us. Until next time.